Hello, and welcome back to another conversation with some of the guys here at Forefront Sims. Today we have Tyler and Cody. Tyler and Cody, if you want to give just a brief explanation of who you are, where your perspective is coming at from the company, and then we'll get right into the questions we have for today.
Let's do it. My name is Cody. I'm one of the co-founders of Forefront. Um, been a GC for a long time and been a golf advocate for only 5 or 6 years now. But I fell in love with it pretty hard. So, um, obviously started a golf company. Um, but yeah, huge passion for the game and love the construction and building golf sims in people's homes and businesses.
Hey folks, yep, Tyler Brownfield, work with Forefront Simulators. I get involved quite a bit with our commercial simulator design and build outs, especially on the design side. Also an avid golfer, not nearly as good as I would like to be, but love the space for sure.
Awesome. Well, I know we have a specific kind of series of questions today that are all regarding a turnkey commercial golf simulator design and build. So, all of our questions are going to be regarding that kind of topic, and we'll get right into the first one, which is what should be included in a turnkey commercial golf simulator build out?
So obviously, golf sim is the number one answer, but a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of components that go into that. So for us, our or what if you're looking to open a commercial sim business, the one thing that you want to make sure is it's got all the needed equipment, which is a lot more components than people realize. But your basic launch monitor, um, computer, projector, and then you have your screen, turf, hitting mat, all the goodies, and then ceiling and wall protection is a huge one, especially in a commercial facility. You want to make sure that it's good quality and serves a good purpose because you're not going to get great golfers. You're going to have some that struggle and shank more than your average person. So um, you want to make sure that that ceiling and wall protection is top notch. Tyler, what else am I missing?
Well, I think especially when we think of commercial versus some of our residential projects, the sort of the quality of the equipment being more commercially focused is a big piece of it. Everything from the projectors, so having something with higher lumens that can compete with more commercial lighting that's out there. From a launch monitor perspective, making sure you've got something that's got easy to use software. So if you've got fresh people, or as you mentioned, newer golfers that are coming in for the first time, it's very intuitive for them to work through it. Um, the quality of the putting turf. But I think there's also the sort of is from your background, Cody, kind of the GC side of things. Depending on who we're working with on commercial facilities, sometimes it's just with an independent operator. Maybe it's with an operator plus a GC and an architect. So having the as a simulator installer and somebody who's in the design build space, somebody who can work with those other teams, other subs, and we can integrate the core simulator spaces, help with the overall design of the facility, but also play nicely with architects and GCs that are involved as well too. So it's a fairly seamless process for the owner that's just involved in some of the core decision making, but the rest of it we can handle and take on more of that turnkey aspect of the build.
Nice. So, going on to the next question, what is the difference between a golf simulator equipment package and a full commercial design build installation?
Sure,
So
go
go
for
ahead.
it.
Tyler. Yeah, this one's great for you.
Yeah, I'll jump into this one. I think it's very similar to when we in the residential space when we talk to folks about sort of DIY enclosure package setups versus a more design build turnkey type solution that we typically provide. In that commercial space, if you're just buying these equipment packages, then you're on the hook for figuring out all the other pieces, the thinking through the electrical, the overall flow of traffic, the overall design and just experience in the space versus when you work with a full commercial design build firm like ourselves. We're helping you through that entire process, thinking about the overall design, what makes sense for golfers, what makes more sense in the commercial setting. Very similar to what Cody said before. There are just a lot of considerations when you have a lot of people in various levels of experience with golf coming into your facility, being safe, factoring in all those considerations, and working with somebody in that design build space who has all that prior experience. They've done that before. They can save you all the time and effort of learning all those pieces, figuring it out on yourself, on your own. And just the overall look and feel is typically dramatically different, right? If you're going to go with golf simulator equipment packages, you're going to get the same look and feel everywhere, and it's going to feel like what you would typically get from a golf simulator equipment package provider. Whereas with design build, you've got a lot more options to customize the millwork, the padding, the putting turf, and have something either individual bays being sort of unique and themed, or having a consistent look everywhere, but much more elevated than just sort of a standard package deal. So those would be kind of my overarching thoughts on kind of key differences. What experience do you want your clients, your customers to have coming in? Do you want them to feel like something has been built and designed intentionally, or it just looks like, okay, there's kind of training bays set up around the space? But any other thoughts you've got, Cody, feel free to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it is also the type of experience you want to have as an owner.
Right.
Do you want to get in there and get your hands dirty and order an equipment package and figure it out yourself, or do you want more of a white glove service, the full turnkey experience? So, I prefer to just stroke a check to the experts, but some people like to get in there and budget friendly and DIY it up. So,
Sure.
depends on the owner.
Yep.
Yeah. And I know even from our last conversations when we were talking about this more on the residential side, it's especially when you're talking now more so on the commercial side, I think that there's a certain amount of aspects that you guys offer, just even in terms of like peace of mind of knowing that it's set up correctly versus having to guess if you figured out this complex whole system yourself correctly, you know?
Yeah, I think on that, Stephen, it's one of those things where I'm almost scared but proud to admit, we've learned from a lot of mistakes in the past, and we've carried all that experience forward in every other new build that we've done, both on the commercial and residential side. So to exactly what you said, instead of repeating mistakes that we learned on the first sims that we did versus 200 plus sims later, there's a ton of just knowledge that we have with our crews. And again, if you're working with a more experienced design build installer and GC, they're going to be able to handle those things and know a lot of that up front versus you having to figure it out along the way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think now going forward to almost like the natural follow-up question, because obviously, who doesn't want peace of mind and knowing that it's made correctly? So how much does a commercial grade golf simulator room typically cost to get built?
So there's a lot of different factors. That's obviously a loaded question in any industry. And people love to put you on the spot and ask you right then and there. But it can range from 50K per bay to upwards of 100K per bay, and it depends on your technology requirements and what you're looking to get out of that. But then there's also varying factors. A lot of times we're going in these commercial facilities and we're doing more than just the sim itself. We're doing maybe a merchandise area, a little lounge bar. We're typically going in and doing a full remodel on the whole space. So flooring, paint, millwork, all those different aspects. So just beyond the simulator, there's a lot of different key factors to, work in. If you're working with a GC, maybe they can handle that and we just do the bay, which we've done plenty of times, or we come in and we do the whole thing. So just depends on the project. But I think that if you're budgeting for a commercial golf sim, I think if you're around that 50K mark per bay just for the sims, then you're kind of setting yourself up for success.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I think, one of the points I mentioned before, just again, when we think about commercial space, you want to make sure that the equipment, everything from the HDMI cables to all the way up to the projector and launch monitor, are suited for long-term ongoing use, working within the lighting conditions within the space. So, typically that does require some higher quality equipment or equipment that's more suited for those environments. And that's just like Cody said, right? This when you think of this range from 50 to 100K, technology plays a huge part in where that range shifts outside of overall fit and finish and the design elements going into the space.
Yeah. No, I think that those are some important details. But yeah, that range I think for people to think about when they're looking for this information is super helpful. So going forward to kind of the next logistical step of this is, I think what it brings up the question of is what construction requirements should be planned before installing a commercial golf simulator.
So the construction requirements, one of the biggest things is space. Obviously, you want to make sure that you have enough space, but also with all the components, you want to make sure that the electrical is in the correct space where it needs to go. So, like if you work with somebody like us, we provide a full. If we're not doing the build out ourselves, as far as the actual GC work, then we provide full electrical diagrams for the owner, and just make that process a lot easier. And then typically, you have framing to consider, making sure you get those partition walls, how you want those, if you want them fully enclosed. We do a lot of angled partition walls just to so it doesn't feel super closed off when you come in. We usually don't get a massive 5 to 8,000 square foot facility like everyone would dream about. We're usually dealing with about 2,000 square feet and putting 3 golf sims in there. So in order to keep that from feeling super crammed, we design these angle walls, keep the line sight nice and open. Um, but really, when it comes to the simulator, I would say the framing and electrical are two major construction components to make sure that you can fit it within your space. Tyler?
Yeah, those are pretty massive. And Cody alluded to it, but just the overall spacing and flow and making sure that people can be comfortable inside of that space and the construction requirements are addressing that. There are also other considerations when we get into the commercial space with ADA compliance and some of those factors as well too. So there's a lot that goes into it. And again, if you work with somebody who's experienced in this design build space for golf simulators, we can help you think through quite a few of those upfront considerations, and even everything from some of the networking and other pieces you need to own and operate the business. We can help you make those considerations, and then working with your own GC can implement those with the appropriate trades.
Nice. So going on to the next question here. What does a professional golf simulator installer handle beyond just the launch monitor and the screen?
So the one thing that we pride ourselves on, and any good installation company should, is the overall fit and finish. So one major factor that takes it from a DIY to a commercial super nice quality product would be the ceiling and wall protection. Making sure that that's done really well, and we've talked about the importance of making sure we're not destroying sheetrock with shank golfers. And so, the fit and finish of the ceiling and wall protection, we include LEDs in our golf sims, but then you have the turf, the hitting mat, making sure those interact together, and they're either completely recessed or pretty much flush to where there's no tripping hazard. Hooking up all the electrical components and making sure that they're in working condition. One thing a lot of people don't consider is we're super intentional on the screen size and filling the whole screen with a projected image. So a lot of that, there's a lot of ratios and formulas that come into making sure the projector's set at the right depth from the screen, and all those little minor details come together to create this overall really nice tight product. And we also do the tech setup as well. So our guys are, they're well versed in hanging screens, but they're also well versed in installing all the software, the technology, making sure that they can take a golf club and swing into it. And the launch monitor is doing its job, the projector is doing its job, the computer is doing its job, and all the information is correctly relayed on the TVs. So you know, our installers are pretty all encompassing from a skill set of you know, ranging from, you know, framing, hanging a screen, installing software. So it really varies.
Yeah, I think in Cody was getting to, but just the overall calibration and setup, making sure you're getting as much accuracy as possible out of your launch monitor because we've got all the right specs and distances in place. The projector is a big one. I hate going into a facility where the whole screen isn't filled by the projection for coming out from the projector. And
You have the dumping black bars above and below.
Exactly. That's the worst. So we're always very focused on making sure we fill the screen and we size the screens appropriately. But then there's also just the overall handoff back to the owner. So making sure a lot of these owners, they come from all varying maturities of some golf experience and golf simulator experience, but especially folks who love golf, they play golf, they want to do a simulator business, but they haven't really worked with simulator software. We go through a whole handoff and training process so they're aware of how to operate all the systems, or maybe they've used a different launch monitor or a different brand versus what they're putting in their facility, so they need to get up to speed. So I think with anybody who's considering themselves a professional, doing that sort of handoff, having some support after the fact, and one of the things that we do is also offer ongoing support and maintenance plans for commercial facilities, because at the end of the day, some aspects of your simulator are consumable, especially if you've got people hitting in it all day long. So, making sure you've got sort of that ongoing support option. Again, if I'm thinking of somebody who's doing this professionally, being able to provide that for a commercial simulator owner.
Yeah, I think it even just keeps on coming back to that peace of mind and attention to detail that obviously shows that you guys have.
Yeah.
So with that, we've gone through a lot of details of this already, but what do you guys think are some of the biggest mistakes that businesses make when building a golf simulator room?
So I would say there's two major mistakes that I've seen, and that we try to consult with new clients about. Number one is technology.
Mm-hmm.
You have to consider, yes, there's going to be people coming in just to hit some golf balls, but a lot of these people that are going to take time out of their day to go hit golf balls in an indoor facility are going to be, golfers. They're going to be very golf centric people who want to go in there and learn more about their swing, learn more about the data analytics on the ball and all those factors. So making sure that you choose the right technology that that creates the best overall indoor golf experience that you can, because the last thing you want to go do is spend, $50 to $75 an hour, and it's just crap technology that you don't get a lot out of, or it just feels super gimmicky. And mistake number two that I see, which I think is probably ultimately one of the largest ones, is creating an environment, not just throwing up some golf sims in a commercial space, but creating almost like that country club experience to where people want to go and hang out and want to be there. The more time that they spend there, the more money you make, obviously, but creating that, like, that homey feel, holding leagues, branding is wildly important. Creating that really cool brand which you can sell merch off of, but also make people feel like they're a part of something bigger than just, going to Top Golf and hitting balls. Which I love doing that still to this day. But when we go to actually some of our facilities and we play in the leagues and support the owners, and like when I'm there on those league nights, it's just really cool to be in that environment and be with those guys. And so I feel like owners that are super successful in the industry create a really good brand and experience, and create that overall professional environment to where it doesn't feel like you just DIY'd 3 sim bays and threw them up, like 3 enclosures. So I think those are my biggest two. Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, those would be the biggest ones, especially what you mentioned. There's this concept of like third place. So it's a place you want to go. It's a community experience. So, having that is something that owners are thinking about from the start, not as an afterthought, is pretty key for just their overall business success. The technology part plays a huge part of it, right? If I can go somewhere where I've got access to swing cameras and I can do some of the AI analysis on my swing, or I've got slow motion impact cameras. That's something you can't necessarily get everywhere. So factoring some of those things into, what experience do you want to enable, and also what can you do for non-golfers. I know we've done plenty of multi-sport simulator installations in addition to golf, so it gives something for if you want to have kids or the family come to these facilities and have something else to do, that if maybe they're not the best golfers, but they can still enjoy the space and pay for the
Mhm.
time to leverage the base. That's a key piece. The third one is maybe just overall, not accounting for the right space requirements. So, thinking about both managing for left and right hitters and making it comfortable for swinging, and also safe for people. So, again, in these ideas where maybe you have only a few staff members, or maybe it's an unmanaged 24/7 type facility, how do you ensure that it's safe in those environments? The space has been accounted for so that you have less risk for injury or any sort of insurance issues that you might run into.
Indoor swing syndrome is a real thing.
Yeah,
So if you make it tight on somebody and they're not used to it, they're going to change their swing.
that's right.
And I love the even just the thought of not just the logistics of this, but because we talked about this when we were talking about residential as well, but making it be a place that you actually want to be is so important. If you're going to make the investment in something like this, I think that that's such a important factor that that I think the purely logistical mind of answering the questions just wouldn't necessarily hit. So I love that.
Well, I mean, you got to think golf has exploded in the last, 5, 6 years.
Mhm.
So country club fees have gone up,
Yeah.
and not everybody can afford to join a country club, and they're getting really expensive. So why not offer that experience to the vast majority that can afford it, and have it in your commercial space?
No, I think yeah, exactly. That's an awesome way to look at it. So going on to the next question, and it kind of actually I think goes into that exact idea that we were just talking about. How should a business elevate whether excuse me, how should a business evaluate whether a space is suitable for a commercial golf simulator?
So it starts with understanding the bare minimum requirements for a commercial golf sim, which are completely different than a residential golf sim.
Mm,
We squeeze simulators in a lot tighter places in residential applications because your primary focus is one person. But in a commercial application, you have to consider, all different handicaps. Like Tyler said, right and left golfers. So that changes your space requirements. So the minimum that we like to try to stay around for a commercial facility is 15 feet wide.
Yeah.
Um, and then we prefer to be, around 10 feet or higher for the ceiling. And again, that just goes back to that little indoor swing syndrome. People are uncomfortable swinging inside till they take a couple and they're used to it. So my biggest advice to anybody wanting to start a commercial golf sim facility: bring a driver with you when you go meet the realtor and go stand in the spot. And if you can swing comfortably, then we can put a golf sim in there, for the most part. It's really that 15-foot wide, roughly 10-foot high. And then obviously, how many bays can I fit in a space? When you're building a business plan for this type of business, everything's built on hourly bay price, membership price. So you want to make sure that it fits your business plan from a how many bays can you fit in, and the experience you can create.
Yeah. I think back to thinking about the holistic design build for the space. The two key pieces related to the bay would also be sort of the what I would call like the safety distance, right? So we try to think about from wherever the hitter is or where their ball is, at least 8 feet of distance of clearance behind them is sort of a safety space to make sure folks stay behind that. And sometimes we put up things like knee walls or pony walls to help give a clear distinction of where people need to stay behind to be in a safe space, and also make the golfer feel comfortable that they can swing freely, as Cody was mentioning. I think the other consideration for space is also where are you going to have seating or bar tops that people can lean against to. Again, you think about this idea, whether it's individual golfers or it's a foursome of buddies that want to play a scramble in the simulator. You want everybody to have a good experience, even if they're not up at the actually swinging on the simulator. So accounting for just kind of the overall space and occupancy and flow, and making sure you've got enough of that space available that people can move in and out easily. They can get their golf bags around. There's places to put golf bags and golf clubs, those types of things. It's easy to think just about where can the simulator fit, but then again, we start to think about the overall experience, flow of traffic, people coming in and out, that kind of thing. That adds to it, and that's where, again, working with an experienced professional is going to help you think through a lot of those considerations that you may have not thought about at the start of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So, going on to our next one here, we touched on it obviously within this, and I think you've even answered it. So feel free to go quickly through this one. But what ceiling height, room depth, and width are needed for a commercial golf simulator bay?
So, like you said, that 15-foot wide, roughly 10 feet tall in ceilings, and then the golfer stands. We've gone pretty close to the screen if we're in a tighter spot, but around 8 to 10 feet from the screen is where the golfer stands. So that additional 8 foot behind that, so about 16 foot of depth just for the bay itself,
Right.
to create clearance
Yeah.
for comfortability. And then key considerations, like Tyler said, walkway seating and additional hangout spots beyond that.
Yeah, agreed with all those things.
Yeah. And going forward to another kind of, again, more logistical question, but what electrical, lighting, flooring, and sound considerations matter most for a commercial golf simulator?
Lighting is a huge one, obviously, because you want to find the right balance of not blowing your budget on a crazy high lumen expensive projector, but also not washing out with a ton of light. So you want to have the ability to dim the overhead lights, but then we usually are doing LED accents throughout. So when you dim those overhead lights, you still have adequate lighting for, um, you know, the overall mood and vibe as well. So making sure that you have, dimmable, operational, good lighting. One thing that people forget about is make sure you have good HVAC, because this isn't like a golf course where I'm taking a swing and then it's another few minutes before I swing again. These are repetitive, quick golf swings. You get sweaty super fast, and you're going to have a lot of warm bodies in there. So make sure the HVAC in the place is really good. But when it comes to flooring, we do turf as far back as we can. We usually use that turf to LVP or turf to different flooring transition as a good delineation of, like, hey, don't walk in here when somebody's swinging. So
Mm.
that's a huge factor. Soundproofing, you got to consider if your space is attached to another space or in between two businesses. That's a huge thing to consider moving forward. A lot of times you have firewalls in between, which that extra sheetrock helps, but golf sims aren't necessarily the quietest thing. Our ceiling and wall protection that we do is they're built very similarly to an acoustical panel anyways, so that does help dampen the sound. But you might have to consider some additional acoustical panels for the wall, treatments. And then when we work with our design team, we make those look intentional, so they're not just randomly hanging on walls. Tyler, what else am I missing?
But I think just on the acoustic topic, especially if you have a larger, wider open space, there might be some other considerations out in the general space where we would also do acoustic tiles or some sort of hanging acoustic treatment just to help cut down on the overall reverberation throughout the whole space. Again, just kind of depending on how open your space is. You covered a lot of the core things on the lighting considerations, this balance of making the general open space visible and easy for people to see with enough light, but not impacting as much on the simulator bays. And then I think on the electrical, there's a lot of deeper technical considerations, but typically we would want to run dedicated dedicated breakers and circuits to each one of the simulators, and then have separate circuits for if you've got to plug in a vacuum to go regular maintenance throughout the facility, making sure you're not going to take out one of the simulators. And if a simulator does go down, you can take out the power just to that space, doing your repairs, doing your equipment replacements, and then have it back on up and running without taking out the rest of the bay. So there are a lot of more deeper technical considerations and trade considerations when you think about these spaces. And again, working with a professional design build group can help you think through a lot of those things.
Yeah, and so I feel like we've gone through a lot of the, some of the logistical, some of the even like the mindset aspects of like what people should be, looking for or assessing when they're trying to figure out what they're trying to achieve with this. But going forward to, I think, a really tangible question that I think will be very helpful for people once they're able to maybe take that next step. What should be included in specifically a proposal for a commercial golf simulator installation?
Tyler, I think this is a good one for you to run with.
Yeah. So I think a few different pieces, especially for us, if it's a commercial build, typically we're in that proposal, we want to include some sort of at least rough rendering and overall sort of design plan on what we think that owner should be considering, especially if they've already given some feedback, because it dramatically helps to sort of see a visual understanding of what's going to be built. I think the other key piece is, what are the core components that are included in the overall investment, especially some of the technology pieces. I know sometimes folks will just include, oh, you get a projector, but sometimes it is very important to know, okay, I'm getting a commercial quality projector that's going to have enough lumens to offset the ambient light or the other light that's going to be in the space. So it's not necessarily line item detail, but I think it's important for some of the key aspects of the simulator to detail out what those are going to be, just so the owner knows exactly what they're getting. And then I think at least in the initial proposal, some definition between, especially if we know that the owner is working with a more GC for the broader shell build out, or some of the walls, or architects, at least a basic understanding of kind of what is your simulator installer, the design build firm's overall scope of work. Like, what are they focusing on? What's the GC focusing on? And having at least a summary level understanding of who's doing what, just so there's no issue or overlap. And then obviously, as you move more closer to the actual build and getting to a scheduled work, getting to those fine sort of line item details, so everybody knows what their focus is going to be accordingly. But anything else, Cody, you would add into that?
No, like you said, it's just a clear understanding of what you're getting and what you're not getting, because there's so many components that go into a golf sim that you don't even think about. Even just all the cables and brackets, and I mean, I forget how many SKUs of inventory that we carry, just because there's so many individual components that go into this. So just at a minimum, you want to make sure that the golf sim is all encompassing, so that all you have to do as an owner is swing a club and make sure that it works. Because like I said, there's a lot of pieces to it, but I think you pretty much covered it.
Nice. And I think it's so important that you even brought up the whole scope of work aspect as well. In any construction, and especially any specialty construction, that overlap and surprises, so to speak, of who should be doing what is obviously so common. So the care to detail in that, I think, is just insanely important. I mean, as well as everything else.
Yeah, I think that's a key part. Cody had kind of mentioned it earlier in a prior question, but just this idea, we're very flexible to work with the GC and other trades, kind of figure out, okay, what makes more sense for them to be handling, because they've already got framers or drywallers, that may be already set up to do other aspects. So let's focus on that scope of work for them, and we'll focus on the places where we've got our trained crews to handle more of the simulator installation piece. Even though we can do some of those other things, let's make it very clear to know who's doing what, and having the right folks, focus on the right areas.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective on it. Um, so going on to the next question. Again, we've talked about a lot of the different sides of this, but how do you compare a turnkey golf simulator contractor versus hiring out a bunch of separate vendors?
I mean, as a GC,
Hmm.
coming from experience, it is a hard job. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of adults that you have to babysit and schedules. I mean, it's a really, really tough job. So when you hire someone like us, you're removing all that headache and that responsibility because we do have the ability to be a fully turnkey service for, for you as an owner. Again, going back to like how there's cables and brackets that you don't think about in a golf sim, there's plenty of aspects in the whole build itself that you don't realize that, come into play. So, and then making sure that it's it's all like we talked about, all encompassing. And when we control the design and the build out, it just creates a more seamless flow for the owner because this is a big investment. You're starting in business, you're spending a lot of money doing it. You want to make sure that the experience to getting there and being able to open your doors is, I mean, it's fun. And if you're with the right person, it can be a lot of fun. You don't want it to be this headache, drug out process. When are we ever going to hit a deadline? So um, we have a lot of key components that come into managing that, from project coordinators, project managers, schedulers, down to our golf sim installers who are experts. Um, we have subs that work for us almost every week, and when we say, "Hey, we need you over here," they hop over here. It's not "Oh, I'll be there in 3 weeks." So having all that, that makes a big difference versus just somebody, who's gonna. And if you hire a golf simulator installer and a GC independently, obviously you can go that route, or you want to try to do it yourself with all the key different vendors. But, we just try to remove the headache and be as white glove as we can.
Yeah.
I think just everything Cody said, right? There's a reason why we have, project managers, project coordinators on staff, because there are a lot of moving parts to deal with. And so it really just becomes the question of, is that something you want to add onto your plate as the owner versus just focusing on how am I going to start and establish and grow this business? Or do you also want to handle all the, for lack of a better term, the sort of cat herding as it would be of working with multiple
Yeah.
vendors and subs. So it's to each their own, but that's one of the major things that if you're working with a turnkey provider in this space, you should be expecting that they're going to take the large majority of that off your plate, and you're really just there for key decisions and maybe some design input and those types of things. And then obviously being able to start your business, once the installation is complete.
Yeah. And I think it's important to kind of contextualize, and correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but I know Cody, you said you have a good amount of experience even previously as a GC. I think that you run into so many, whether it's homeowners or DIYers or whatever, that essentially try and do that themselves, and almost, we even talked about this in the last conversation, end up hiring a GC in the long run because it is so much cat herding, so much, even with something that's maybe more specialty and not necessarily a full home build or something like that. Like it's, I've seen it from other clients. I'm sure you guys have from the others, and Cliff mentioned it last time, but sometimes you end up even just hiring that out in the long run, and you would have just saved the headache, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Absolutely. It costs you more money in the long run and more headache. So it there's a phrase, buy once, cry once. It's, you just spend the money now, get it over with, and once you're past that, you're grateful that you went that route.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna use that. All right. Well, we really only have one last question here for today with these, and that is, what factors affect the final cost of a commercial golf simulator design build project?
Um, Technology is a huge one. Um, there's individual components to the golf sim
Mhm.
that pretty much stay the same for the most part. Turf, hitting mat, screen, or ceiling and wall protection, that can vary a little bit if you want to upgrade to like a leather or suede. But technology is a huge cost swinging factor. And then, like we talked about, beyond the scope of just the simulators, that's a huge cost cost swing. What are we doing? Are we doing a merch counter? Are we doing like a check-in place? Are we doing additional TVs and millwork throughout? Are we doing a bar? There's so many other things that go into it. But I would say factors that you can control on the golf sim side are just what tech you go with.
Yeah. You know, Cody's alluding to this, but it's also just the overall fit and finish, right? Like how elevated do you want that, even within the simulator bay, that space to look? So we talked about things like doing acoustic panels. Wood slat panels are very popular these days. But if you want more custom branding inside of your bays and logos and sign walls and all those types of things, so as you might expect, right? That's additional materials and labor and other considerations, and also just experience to do those installations well. That will factor in, but as part of the investment, right? It creates something that's more unique than you may get of just doing something like more standard, or like the next commercial simulator business next to you. So that overall fit and finish, along with the technology, and then as Cody mentioned, just additional things outside of the simulator bay, bars, lounges, merchandise counters. Those are all just key factors that can add into the overall investment.
Well, guys, that is the end of our questions for today. But I think these have been really, really helpful for anyone who's looking to get into the space. So thank you guys so much for the time. If there's anything else you want to add as a final thought, then please do. But otherwise, I think I got everything that I needed.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it was great.
Awesome. All right, sweet. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Stephen.